Welcome to this week's Vegan Family Podcast.
Yes, we are very excited this week to have a very special guest, which we'll get to in just a moment. But Cheryl, how are you doing? How are things for you during this lockdown?
Well, I think we've gotten into the phase of this is normal now. What do I do to spend my time? At
Yeah.
least from the kid's point of view. Over the weekend, my 6-year-old decided he wanted to start making all these cooking videos,
Oh, nice.
which is really cute. And then it got to the point like he made so many videos. I think he's got like 9 videos now.
Wow.
He did them using the Ruby Roth book. And
Yep.
we've had on the podcast before. And he'll show the recipe up, and then he'll kind of teach you, how to do it. And of course, the 4-year-old wants to be part of it, so he pops up and he's kind of pesters
Photobombing. Yeah.
the video, which is like funny. And then they started taking that and started making other kinds of videos. I've got the 4-year-old doing like a science experiment with like LaCroix and potato chips. I've got a video of him, the 4-year-old, making a pour course like in our house. Like he's like
Oh, yeah, of course.
jumping over things, and then he's like, "Now I have to get past our mean dog," and she's not mean, she's just sitting there in the video.
That's
Like we
great.
this whole thing now that this is like what they do to like kill time. So I think that's where we are. We
I
moved forward.
I would agree. There's a big thing that's happening right now. As you said, we've all reached a certain threshold, and we are now on day 50. Who's counting? And part of that is this day to day where you do your homeschooling, you do your work that you do, of course, as a full-time employee of a animal rights group, and then you decide it's you realize that it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and you still have a lot more hours in the day, and this has been going on and on. So hang in there. They say we're all in this together, which is kind of ironic because none of us are actually together. Um, so yeah, we'll get through it. And I think helping to sort of dovetail into this week's guest. How are things on the food front? Are you finding yourselves well nourished? Are you able to get to the store?
Yeah, the stores have had more stuff in them
Yeah.
the last couple of weeks, which I think is really nice. I don't know if that's how it goes with you, but I mean, this is the first time in like 6 weeks that we've had tofu in the house.
Oh wow, yeah, yeah. There's been a shortage here too.
Doing a lot more cooking, I think, with the kids being really interested in doing cooking videos and stuff, but also, we pulled out our air fryer. We've got, just a lot more. I think, again, it's like we're just kind of in the groove of this now.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
it's more creative, and there's more. It doesn't feel like the first couple of weeks when it was like, I can't get
Yeah,
chickpeas in the city.
yeah.
You know.
How are we going to get through this? So, with that said, we will be right back.
It's time for Animal Outlook's Vegan Family Podcast with your hosts Eric C. Lindstrom and Cheryl Leahy.
And we're back.
Yes. So, as you said in the intro, it's a time now where we're actually cooking a lot more at home. We're actually pulling out cookbooks. I'm one of those cooks. Of course, I can't call myself a chef, but I'm one of those cooks that whips things up and it turns out great. I'm really lucky like that. But I've gotten to a point now where I actually need to start looking at these cookbooks because I'm running out of, quivers in my arrows in my quiver. I need to find new recipes. I need to try new things. I need to make my shopping, a little bit more purposeful. So, but it's fun. I mean, we're trying new things, and I think we're all hanging in there and doing a really good job.
Yeah, and I think this is also a good time to start, developing healthier habits too, which is why I'm so glad that we have our guest on today.
As am I. It's such a great honor to introduce Julianna Hever. I've known about her forever, and it's just great to finally have an opportunity to talk with you. So welcome to the Vegan Family Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
We really appreciate you coming on here. I've sort of known of your work for a number of years here, having been kind of in the vegan world, although from the animal side, and then you're coming at it from the health and nutrition side. And I think this is the area that a lot of people really kind of struggle with, even if that might be their initial motivation coming in. There's a lot that that, you know, we all grow up with in terms of beliefs and feelings about food and kind of that insecurity about, is this really healthy? How do I do this?
Absolutely. There's so much deep-seated passions and beliefs and systems in place about nutrition. And then because of that, there's so much misinformation out there and people get so confused. I mean, you know, needless to say, it's like there's all this constant bombardment of messaging. You don't know what to take in and what to not. And then add it this whole layer of plant-based and, you know, and having kind of a specialized way of looking at food. It's definitely confusing, and it's definitely a really important topic. But I mean, food is so deeply embedded in all of us. You know, it's part of our culture and our upbringing and our family and our relationships and it just has so much deep meanings. And, you know, we always say that everyone eats, so everyone has an opinion on food. And therefore, it's probably one of the most complicated topics out there right now.
Yeah. Julianna, how do we play off of the intro to this episode by asking you what your feelings are or what you're hearing about people who are at home now and who are challenged to cook for themselves probably a lot more than they ever used to? Are you seeing a difference is there a trend that's taking place? How is the plant-based diet sort of surviving this or thriving in all of this?
It's so interesting, this specific time right now. I think that it kind of puts a spotlight on the absolute amazing benefits of eating this way. I mean, you know, when I've gone to the stores now and the foods that I eat are mostly untouched. I mean, granted, yes, I saw tofu kind of lacking and chickpeas too when I was in LA, but you know, but they're back. And I mean, other than that, you know, we saw all the meat counters were empty and that wasn't going to affect my intake, you know, what I was going to get at the store. And, you know, so it's kind of interesting. It's kind of like a push towards a re-emphasis of all these staple foods and why they are so extraordinarily beneficial and easy and accessible and convenient, even in something as extreme as what we're experiencing now. But there's so many trends happening that I've seen that because there's so much psychologically and socially that's so different and unexpected and unplanned for with the circumstances right now. You know, there's this, you know, Ray and I always talk about, you know, that in 2011, chronic overnutrition surpassed chronic undernutrition around the world for the first time in history. And so we've always, you know, emphasized this whole concept of chronic overnutrition. And, you know, we have this economic abundance where food is everywhere and food is on every corner and every airplane. There's always food around. And for the first time, you know, in all of our lives, it's like, well, wait a second, maybe there is a concern. This food scarcity came up for the first time in our lives. And it's really interesting and shocking. I mean, like stopped everyone in its tracks. And I think a lot of people are having different reactions to it. So, you know, I see a lot of people complaining about this quote unquote quarantine 15 where people are kind of eating more because they're at home and there's just, you know, they're stress eating quote unquote or bored or all this. I'm hearing all these different reasons, or people are just experimenting more in the kitchen and just eating more. So there's that. And there's this whole like, well, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to get food, so I'm just gonna eat as much as I can right now. Yeah. There's like the survival instinct that's kicking in, which is quite unique, right? We haven't seen that.
Yeah, it's like a panic moment of I better pack it on now. You know, our sort of evolutionary brains are saying, what if it's not there in the future?
Yeah, I mean, we never thought we'd go back to this. It's like wild. But then at the other hand, you know, it's a wonderful time to think about why plant-based is such an incredible diet. Like, first of all, you know, all of these things that happen, a lot of these are zoonotic diseases that are stemming from the consumption and production of animal products. You know, you can look at factory farming and looking at how significant a role it plays in antibiotic overuse, like the most use of antibiotics, which is causing problems. So it just kind of all these roles are colliding. And I think it's also really interesting kind of where I focus, because when I work with clients you know, we have a lifestyle transformation program and we have people losing significant amounts of weight and reducing their blood pressure and cholesterol and, you know, just getting healthy. And if you look at these interesting where this collision is happening between chronic and communicable diseases. So the coronavirus, you know, you're seeing now that these comorbidities, and when people have a comorbidity such as obesity or diabetes or something like that, they have a much more significant chance of having, you know, greater morbidity and mortality from the disease. So there's this kind of intersection that's happening too with why a plant-based diet is so important for everything. It just kind of like re-highlights why we need to eat this way.
Yeah, I think that's a super interesting kind of angle for all of this. I think I'll say that this has been my experience as a child myself when I was a child, and then also seeing this in other kids, like thinking about kind of the angle with, the sort of family and children aspect of this. But I think health is sort of like kind of a removed topic for people who are young and healthy sometimes, especially children who are, having a hard time just kind of, getting up and dressed for school and kind of, getting their clothes on in the morning kind of thing. And now that it's right in front of your face, you can't ignore it. This is a time to say, no, there are things you can do to kind of take control of your health. And maybe this is what clicks that in for people. So I don't know, have you kind of experienced anything different when it comes to this sort of topic around children, or any different challenges or opportunities?
It's so interesting with children. I mean, they are invincible and they don't see any of that because, I remember too as a child, like, can't imagine getting cardiovascular disease in 50 years.
Can't imagine getting old.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. Gosh, it's so mind blowing. But, I don't know, like the clients I'm working with are more adults and their families are kind of all at home and they're having these great opportunities to cook. I love what you said, Cheryl, about your son. Like, that is so cute to make videos, cooking videos, because what a great way to get excited about food and, and to make that's just a wonderful way to get children involved in the kitchen and to get them excited. It sounds like they're totally into it. And I think that I've seen that happening with the families that I'm working with, where their kids are just kind of getting involved because they're home and they're maybe more interested, or they're just taking more of more time to get involved in the cooking process. I mean, anytime we have a situation where you can include children in the food dialogue, in the shopping, growing in the garden, preparing, choosing meals, executing the meals, they have this vested interest, and that is where the research shows they're going to have more likelihood of appreciating healthy food. And I mean, really, when you talk about that, the most important thing, right, is role modeling. Yeah. And so whatever we do is more important than what we're saying.
Yeah. In the beginning of before the podcast, you and I were chatting a little bit about my friendship with T. Colin Campbell and his son Tom Campbell. And years ago, I did an interview with Tom when his book at the time was called The Campbell Plan, when his book came out. And I asked him about how do you establish a vegan household with younger kids who are, as you say, so in tune with what the adults are doing. And how do you encourage healthy eating? And one of the simplest tricks, I guess you would call it, that he showed me that we still do every day is having easily grabbable, hand-sized, finger-sized, good foods around all the time. So, as simple as a fruit bowl, with fresh fruit that's already been washed, that's something the kids will grab because it's right there. Our kids are grabbing apples and grapes and bananas at a rate that you can't even imagine right now because it's right there. You're showing them, you're leading by example and saying, okay, we're going to have oatmeal with all of these wonderful fruits on top and some maple syrup, and that's a really good, delicious breakfast. Or I have a 5-year-old right now who's addicted to avocado toast. And part of that was the everything sprinkles, which I'm sure you know about by now. Yeah. Oh my gosh. So that was a game changer in terms of getting them to eat, something like avocado toast. So as we talk about this podcast, Julianna, do you have any, in your experience, both with your clients or just in your writings, what would be some tips that you would give parents that are so easily translatable to maintaining a plant-based diet in a household right now?
Yeah, those are all really, really important. And honestly, the number one overarching, most important thing from all the research and all of, my experience, and I'm a mom too, so all of it, all combined, is the role modeling. So if you're telling your kids, no, eat your broccoli, and you're over there hustling down the vegan ice cream, they're seeing that,
French fries.
So creating that sense of this is what we do and this is how we eat is really important. Having access to all that great food, like making it palatable and accessible, like you said, like you want to have easily reachable items like that, like vegetables that are already cut up into, in the fridge that they could grab and grab the hummus and just have a quick snack. Teaching them little tricks in the kitchen, like, getting them involved, like having them, even just picking the recipe, if they go through say, here's a book, which sounds good to you, we'll make it. just to get them involved so they have a vested interest
Yeah.
in the whole thing. And then, not having all the junk food around is really important, because if it's there, kids are going to want a cookie. They're going to want
Yeah.
the ice cream. It's there. It's so that, trying to make that impression of, we call it rare and appropriate, people and places rather than time between events. So it's like something that's special, a special occasion. We've kind of taken out the special treats out of that concept. It was like, it's a treat, but it's become like every day when people are having dessert and all that, and it's not really special anymore. So making those kind of foods more rare. And then, it's really nice when the whole family's involved. I mean, I think I've seen the most success with families where both parents are on the same page about the food, because then it's just how it is in the home. And I've seen so many successful families because, that's just what they ate and that's just what they know. And then especially because if they're going out into the real world and school and play dates, although that's not quite happening right now, it's, you want to just set that foundation at home. And I think that's actually one of the benefits too. There's so many kind of interesting things that are happening because of the quarantine. And I think that could be one of them, is that they are in this environment that you are, able to kind of control the whole food environment for this period of time that's more extended than usual. And that could be helpful too, just in terms of, getting their palate used to certain things, getting their habits used to certain things, because everything about food is habit.
Yeah, I think this is really interesting. And as a person who came to this from the, animal side and came to the health side later, like the whole foods, plant-based side of things later, one thing that really struck me is the idea that if you get that food out of your environment, the other food starts tasting better. And I think that that's kind of a foreign concept. I mean, I don't want to speak for sort of most people because I had this experience, but I feel like that is true for most people. Like especially when it comes to kids who say, I don't like that.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, you don't like it now, maybe, but, keep trying it. Or, when you're used to eating, greens all the time, and then you're going to try another vegetable that otherwise would have tasted bitter, especially because younger palates, they're going to be more sensitive to that kind of stuff. You're going to be sort of actually like the new taste, even if 2 weeks ago when you were eating, tofurkey, not that I have anything against tofurkey, I love it so much, and, vegan ice cream or whatever, it's going to taste, less appealing. So I think that concept that you can intentionally change your taste preferences by changing your food environment is profound. And I think it's especially a big deal when it comes to kids, because you can't, I think the message I got from some of this whole foods plant-based stuff is like, you can't rely on your willpower. Like, you're going to be, like you say, Juliana, like, you're going to be at a play date or a birthday party or something. And if it's just about generally I'm going to hold back, at some point you're going to be, failing. Instead, and kids have even sort of less of that, and they don't have the, they don't have the impulse control. And you're just on a day-to-day basis dealing with the little things here and there, especially with younger kids, that can use up that kind of willpower, that it's about changing that environment. And then, no, they actually do like it. Like, did you know you can like this? I think is a really sort of profound and new concept that for me really was a big deal, understanding some of this whole foods plant-based stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, the foods that, I grew up with eating chips and cookies and granola bars and, just standard American, garbage. And, you have to if you have that all the time, how could you expect some steamed vegetables to taste good? If you're used to eating all these, I mean, it's hyper palatable by definition, all the sugars and salts and oils and stuff that just make it so hard to resist. And once you have that first bite, you can't stop, kind of a thing, because there's, your palate reacts, your brain reacts, there's dopamine hits that happen. And, kids are definitely, I don't know if they're more vulnerable to that, but they're definitely vulnerable to it. And, if you start their palate a certain way and they grow up enjoying those foods, that's great. But most people don't, most of us don't. And it's really, we're challenged against everyone. I mean, I remember having major arguments in my home, and blog posts, I would blog about it because it would drive me crazy. When my kids were doing sports, and it was like the snack that they would give them right after their game or right after their practice, when their cells are all vulnerable and all that, the worst time. And they'd be eating, fruit punch with, just garbage food, I mean, it's just, you're bombarded by this stuff. School food is horrible, all of it. It's like this, you're constantly up against it. So, the best you do the best you can. You provide those options, you have them around, you enjoy them, you show your kids how much you love eating them, and it's what they eat overall that matters most. And I don't know how possible it is. I only know a few families that were able to keep their kids completely in this bubble away from all of those things, but you kind of navigate it the best you can. It doesn't have to be perfect.
Yeah, that's a big part of it too, is that you end up finding yourself feeling guilty or frustrated, or as you say, not everyone can establish and maintain that perfect whole foods plant-based diet for their entire family, their kids, and everyone that comes over, and keeping the as like I said early on, or a couple episodes ago. I'm sorry. I went to that retreat that the people who hosted the retreat really well. And I spent 4 days eating nothing but a whole food plants-based diet in this meditative setting, and felt fantastic and inspired and empowered. And in fact, went out and bought all the ball jars to put all the cut up vegetables in, and I make my own salad dressings, and I'm really capable of doing it. And then all of a sudden we found ourselves stuck at home, where I do fall further into those traps, I would call them, of foods that are much more convenient, things that are air fryable, or things that the kids will, consume more readily. So it's a commitment. It's also something where, for me, and maybe you can touch on this a little bit, once I got there, I felt fantastic and I felt different, and I lost 12 pounds almost instantly, and it was all of a sudden my brain was a different place. I was in a different headspace about my own health because of my diet. And I think that's the challenge, but that's ultimately where all of us would like to end up, I think.
Oh yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't think everyone recognizes that until they need to a lot of the time. It's really interesting in terms of children, especially because, I always say you could lead a human to healthy, but you can't make them eat. Because no matter what you want for somebody else, it has to come from within. And with children, they're not at that, they don't have the prefrontal cortex developed, in order to make kind of those decisions. Like, they don't think about when they're going to be 30, 40, 50. They don't think about the threat of diabetes, and they just don't worry about that stuff. And, they shouldn't have to. And most, fortunately, most people don't. But, it just, generally speaking, they have to want it. A human has to want to make these choices. But that's what's so great, is if you have control, when you have control over the food environment, then you can do the best that you can, and you can offer those foods, and you can make that available. But yeah, it's very hard to stay in that mindset if you're not motivated and you have something driving you. All of our clients have a story, have a reason that they came to us, that they want to make these significant changes, because it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable making that first leap. Even if you're going from a standard American diet to a plant-based diet, there's a leap. You have to reframe your world and your food. And food is, like I said, it's so deeply personal. It affects every single part of your life and how you feel and all that. But it has to come from within. So it's interesting.
Yeah. And then I think there's an additional challenge as a parent, right? I mean, even if you know that your children will make, another choice down the road potentially, or, like you said, they're going to be at a sports game, or when you were telling that story, I was kind of laughing because when we first started shifting, my husband got really into the whole foods plant-based stuff and lost a ton of weight and stuff a few years ago, and the kids were pretty little. And I remember being at the beach and with some other families, and it's on one side of us, there's people with Doritos, other side they have pizza. We have a bag of steamed potatoes. And I'm kind of yeah, those are things this is where I started asking, okay, is this really something that we can do? And now it actually feels pretty normal. But these are transitions, like you're saying, it's something that you have to sort of have that spark to do it. But then I think there's this additional challenge as a parent to say, okay, I want to have kind of a healthy family, healthy food environment, even if there are these sort of external, outside in the world challenges. But am I really sure? You go to, say, a doctor, a pediatrician's office, and hear them say things about well, how much milk is your child drinking? And it's
yeah.
We're vegan, and I remember having pediatricians say, well, what about soy milk? What about almond milk? I'm those are totally different things, right?
Yeah.
Why are you even asking this? They don't need this. They got human milk, and if I wasn't so kind of, I guess, disagreeable and assertive about it, I think I can see how that could be like, just kind of get to you over time, especially.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Oh my gosh. My doctor, my pediatrician, my kid's pediatrician, we've been to her since the beginning, almost the beginning, when they were really little. And she like knows my work. And, I wrote a physician's guide to plant-based diets for Kaiser Permanente's journal. And we're members of Kaiser. So as a Kaiser doctor, so she had seen that. And even still, in our conversations, she's sitting there talking to my children. She's like, "Are you having 3 servings of milk?" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh!" Or like one time we came in and the kids one of them had a cold, and I said something about, yes, well, the dairy is congesting or something, and she was like arguing with me. And you're like right in front of the kids, and the kids are like they want to hear what they want to hear. And absolutely, there's this fear because the doctor knows everything. It's so interesting because my ex-husband is a physician. And I sat in on his nutrition classes in med school many, many years ago. And it was like, the extent of it was goiter, iodine deficiency, rickets, vitamin D deficiency. Okay, next topic. Like that was nutrition. Okay.
Yeah.
And I have a master's in nutrition. I studied it. I've been teaching it for 25 years. Throughout our whole marriage, no matter where we went, everyone would ask him the nutrition questions.
Wow.
So there's this reverence for physicians, and a lot of them don't get any, or most of them, in fact, almost all of them get no nutrition education. So, but they will still impose that when they're talking to the kids. And if there's and I had the disagreeable other parent, which is a nightmare. So if you have that, it's like, oh, then you've got fodder. You've got like a doctor, so it gets really complicated if you're not all on the same page, including your doctor.
I can remember. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, what do you sort of arm your plant-based parents with to kind of go out and be confident in the world, and confident with their choices and all that modeling and stuff without feeling like, oh my God, are they going to, die of ricket?
Yeah, you arm them with the science. And that's why we have 2 papers now for physicians, 2 physician guides to plant-based diets. And, so that basically has all the references. So you can give them all that information, in our books that we've written. We have all these sections on where they get their nutrition and all that. So the good news is over the last 15 years since I've been teaching plant-based nutrition, there has been an exponential increase in the amount of healthcare practitioners that are witnessing and practice, like witnessing, experiencing it, seeing it from their patients, and now implementing it with their patient care. And at the least, there's more open-mindedness. It's not completely there yet, because believe me, I can tell you all sorts of stories about our clients going to their doctors. But I think that it's a different time, and it's good because there's it's getting out there, and it's way more known about and understood. So that said, you just provide them with the evidence. There's plenty of evidence right now, and even the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics position paper on plant-based diets or vegetarian diets states that a vegetarian diet, including a vegan diet, is appropriate for all stages of the lifespan and can be health promoting. So it's a great position paper, and that's a great thing to hand to a doctor as well, because it talks about all of the details and it's all referenced. So science, you can't argue with good science, and we have a lot of good science advocating for myriad benefits of a plant-based diet.
Yeah, I can remember there was a screening of PlantPure Nation, which is the film about T. Colin Campbell and a study done in North Carolina. We did a screening in Ithaca, it was attended by a number of Cornell students. And I can remember afterwards there was a Q&A with the director and a Q&A with T. Colin Campbell. And a med student from Cornell University stood up and said, "I'm sorry, but I feel like I missed something in the film. How much meat did you say is enough to be healthy?" And the whole room was just like, wait, what? Like, were you watching the same movie? Because again, she wasn't at that point thinking that, Whole Foods plant-based diet, 100% plant-based diet would be optimal for all stages of human health. And it is. So Julianna, I want the conversation to continue, but I also want to make sure for those listeners who stayed tuned for this long, that they can find out more about you, what you're up to. I know you have a podcast now. They can find out about you on PlantBasedDietitian.com. Any place else you want to send them?
Yes, PlantBasedDietitian.com, but we're doing a lot of blogging, and we have our Science and Saucery podcast all through HealthSpanSolution.com.
Great.
So that's another great place to find us.
So yeah, we're at this stage now where in the house we have, in our house we have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old, who both are, obviously 100% vegan because they can't go grocery shopping. That's another big point that's being made an awful lot, is that they can't make their food choices. You make them for them. And we're going out shopping once a week and bringing back as much as we can of healthy foods to, keep everybody fed throughout the week. What are some, if you have any, what are some, 3-meal-a-day tips you might have, or places they could go for plant-based recipes? I mentioned oatmeal is a great start for our mornings. Lunches, easy dinners. What kind of advice can you give parents who are feeding their families right now and under these conditions?
Yes. Well, we have hundreds of recipes on our websites, but we also just published a book called The Health Span Solution in December that has over 100 recipes, and they're all made from these foods that we are still able to get, rice and beans and other whole grains, and it's basically soups, salads, sides, and sweets. And what I love, our goal was to make this so easy. So like batch cooking, if you've got a family, you could, whip up a couple soups, and you put some of it in the freezer, some of it in the fridge, and you can serve it that one meal, and you kind of change things up. So you're not cooking huge things every day. And you just have easy to grab things. So always having vegetables. I like what you said, putting stuff in a jar, like cutting up. I like to do that once a week or twice a week, where I cut up all my vegetables at one time.
Cucumbers and peppers,
yeah, it makes it so much easier. The other thing that I love now are these convenience foods, like the bagged salads, where you have all the cabbage mixes and stuff like that, where you could just throw it in a bowl. You don't have to wash and chop. It saves a lot of time. But soups are great. Stews and chilies, all those things are really great because you can make a lot of it and just kind of use it throughout the week and mix it up. So you can make like a few different things and then have the kids pick what they want. And you kind of have I like to have like a kind of buffet style where there's a lot of easy things. But yeah, oatmeal's great. Quinoa is also, you could do as a breakfast cereal. We don't talk about breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, and desserts. We just do anytime eating, because it doesn't really matter what you're eating when.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you said, avocado toast, and there's sandwiches and pizzas. You can make pizza, with a tortilla or a pita bread, or all those kind of things. There's so many fun ways to make foods. We have, some veggie burgers. We have a veggie burger formulator in our book, where you just basically take some oats and some grain and some beans and some spices, and you can make all sorts of different flavors. Like we have a Tex-Mex and a hippie and all these different kind of curry burger, all these different flavor profiles, because you could modify so easily with just some herbs and spices. But, whatever they like, it's like, just offer different options. Always having vegetables around is really important. And then you can always batch cook, like you said, potatoes. I always have potatoes on board too, sweet potatoes or regular potato, any kind of potato. I have those around that you could just quickly grab, and they make for great quick meals too, where you can stuff them, make jacket potatoes, stuff them with beans, salsa.
I think soup is a great, especially now here in upstate New York, it's still chilly, but soups and chilies and things like that are great because, as you said, they can become other parts of other meals very easily. So there's this cookbook called the Great Life Cookbook. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of Priscilla Timberlake and Louis Friedman. He's actually one of the instructors of T. Colin Campbell's plant-based nutrition course.
Yes, I met him when I was teaching.
Okay, yes, yeah. He's a great friend of mine, and every Friday for 22 years, they've hosted in their house a whole foods plant-based diet, whole food plant-based dinner. And one of their recipes is a 3-ingredient butternut squash soup that takes probably 15 minutes to make once the butternut squash and the onions have been boiled. And that soup is brightly colored, it's beautiful, and then it could become, the first day it's a soup, the second day it's put on top of rice, the third day it's put on top of pasta, and the kids love it because it's this bright, golden colored, delicious, has maple syrup in it, so it's a little bit sweet. But making things like that ahead of time, making things like that for your dinner tonight, and then expecting it to last for a couple of lunches is just a great tip, I think, for there's a lot of great ingredients out there that become these super simple sauces and soups.
Oh my gosh, yes, that's exactly what we do. Like we'll make a big batch of chili or something, and I'll have it either just hot in a bowl, or then I'll do it over a baked potato one day, or a lot of times Ray always teases me because everything ends up on a salad for me, because I just love salad. So I use soup as dressing and a topping for a salad. But yeah, and you can make them user-friendly for kids too, because whatever whole grain they like. Pasta, like you said, is an amazing food. My kids love pasta. They eat it all the time. And now they have all these fun different types of noodles. I can get lentil pasta, and and black bean pasta and soy pasta. And that's kind of great because then you're giving them some more variety without them, complaining, which is common for the younger children. But there's a lot of versatility. There's so much versatility in a plant-based diet. It's quite extraordinary.
So is there anything that, like I'm hearing this and going like, yes, that's awesome. And then I'm trying to hear it from my sort of skeptical outsider point of view and thinking, is there anything that's like a really important point or misconception, a hurdle that people often sort of come to you with and have a hard time kind of getting over? And what would that be? And how would you kind of coach them through it for active sort of families and children?
Well, I would say in general, and this applies to children and everyone, is we call it macro confusion. And I think macro confusion is one of the biggest contributors to all of the misinformation and not understanding. And this is why people come out every time you say plant-based and they say, where do you get your protein? It's because of macro confusion. And if we stopped using carbohydrates, proteins, and fats as food groups and using them to define foods, and we stopped talking about that, and we just focus on telling people to eat vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, mushrooms, nuts, seeds, herbs, and spices in tasty combinations of soup, salads, sides, and sweets, then you know what you're talking about. People know what beans are and legumes and mushrooms, but nobody knows what a carb is, and everyone's misusing it. And if people are worried about high carb, low carb, just tell them to look at a potato. And a white potato has a better amino acid profile than does 90% lean beef, which is like the perfect example of why everyone is so confused, because it's not a carb. It doesn't matter. None of that matters. And I think if people just let go of those labels and just start talking about foods, like bring the conversation back to actual foods as opposed to biochemistry terms that are irrelevant when it comes to what we eat, that would be huge in ameliorating our conversation.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think when I went vegan, so I was vegetarian for a long time. I had to convince my parents to let me to do it and go to the library and all this stuff. And then I figured, I wanted to go vegan when I was like 13. I wanted to go vegan, but my parents were like, I'm not, making a bunch of different meals. I have 4 siblings. This would have been too much. And so my mom said, when you buy your own food, you can, do whatever you want. And so I was in college and I was in Ireland and I learned that cheese isn't always vegetarian, right? Because they have rennet and cheese. And so at that time I was like, well, I'm still on my parents' dime. I can't really go vegan, but I can get rid of cheese because I'm not vegetarian. That to me was the moment that I shifted into that mindset. Before that, I didn't really think of let's say kale and black beans and whatever as food, if that makes sense. It seemed to be like a thing you had, but then also I could basically eat as a meat eater without the meat while I was still eating cheese. When I got rid of cheese, it was a much different process where so much more color ended up on my plate, so much more mental shift about this food, this is what I want, this is good. Not to say I was a perfect non-junk food eater, definitely not. I really overdid Thai coconut curries for a while. And I think that being able to kind of, have to have a radical enough shift away from the standard American diet to actually look at that stuff on your plate as food, as the thing that makes up the meal, rather than, okay, well, it's just, cheese pizza, which is a meal, is food or whatever. And then I can have, whatever my meat analog with it. And then that's the same meal I would get if I was at, a roller rink or something, you know what I mean? Whatever the junk food stands were giving, I was trying to approximate that until I gave up cheese. And then I had to be okay, no, vegetables and fruit and grains and beans and everything. And I think that was a big shift. That was a much bigger shift for me than going from vegetarian to vegan or going from meat eater to vegetarian.
I mean, we really have to redefine the plate. When you're transitioning to this way of eating, it is a complete redefinition of what we see as a plate and what represents a meal. And like you're saying, so, we're giving up 5 ingredients when you go plant-based, red meat and poultry, however you want to define it. I think it's 5 or 7 ingredients. But then when you stop, it's well, now what am I supposed to eat? Because you're not used to it. We were raised eating a certain way. We are raised, recognizing the big piece of meat in the middle of the plate or the omelet or whatever, and then a little bit of vegetable and a little bit of grain. And that's just what we're used to. So it is kind of like this, well, it's overwhelming at first, but it's a transition, and it just takes time to kind of think, oh wait, I could eat this and I could eat that, and I'm going to try this new ingredient, I'm going to try this new recipe, and just building your repertoire. But like I always say, most people only rotate between maybe 1 or 2 breakfasts, maybe 3 to 4 lunches, maybe 5 to 6 dinners in a week, and that's pushing it. So we really only need about 8 to 10 recipes that we love to eat and we know how to make, and we don't have to think about or stress out about, like stuff that we could just make, and that becomes habit. So you learn these, you find the recipes you love, and you just rotate them in, and then it just becomes part of your regular day. So it's just redefining what we know. It's like learning a new language. It takes time and practice and consistency, and then you just turn it into a habit, and that just becomes what you know.
I love that.
I have one fun way to close out this episode, and Cheryl, you can go first. You ready?
Ready.
What are we going to find in your refrigerator or pantry right now? What are the things that you always have on hand, the things that you and your family are always going to eat, the things that are part of your sort of daily, weekly diets?
We always have some kind of salsa, some kind of
Interesting.
beans. I've said before, it's not refrigerated because we use it in the zoji rushi, but some kind of cooked rice or like lentils. Right now we have a bunch of pickled vegetables that we pickled ourselves to make banh mi, but then I've been like repurposing them to put them on rice with like some avocado and like whatever, like miso or something, or furikake, cucumbers, tomatoes, like, and then we always have apples, oranges, and bananas. One of our apples.
Juliana, what does your kitchen look like?
Well, okay, so I feel like I've been kind of training for quarantine my whole life. I am always overly stocked. Like, I'm a hoarder of healthy foods. Just, I don't know. I always have had this instinct. I don't know why. It's always gotten me in trouble. But when I go home to California, to Los Angeles, I've got all my beans, I've got dried grains, I've got salsas and marinara sauce and all that stuff. Like, my pantry is stocked. And then when I'm going to go to the store, like, I'm always going to have the mixed salad bags, like the cabbage bag, like the mixes. I always have that in my fridge. I always make a cauliflower rice. And I always have hummus and like some sort of kale. But I love vegetables and I love salad, and I put everything I eat on top of that. So it all starts with the salad.
That's great. That's all good ingredients, obviously. Good tips as well.
And I'd be remiss because my daughter could go through a whole cube of tofu a day. Yeah. I have to slow her down. But there's always tofu in the house too.
All different, yeah. All the different textures of tofu, whatever they are, from silken, which we use when we make sundubu jjigae and other Korean soups, on up to extra firm that we use when we press it in a panini press with some teriyaki sauce on it to make some like tofu steak. So yeah, tofu is a big part of our diet.
Oh, you guys just got me so hungry.
That's good. Well, thank you so much, Julianna Hever. This has been such an incredible episode. I'm sure that the listeners have gotten such value out of your expertise. Again, any other plugs you want to add to the end of the episode, we would more than welcome hearing about them.
Well, thank you both, Eric and Cheryl. I'm grateful to be here. And yes, find me at on Science and Saucery, our podcast, and at healthspansolution.com and PlantBasedDietitian.com as well.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you both so much. If you have any ideas for upcoming episodes, you can email us at veganfamily@tryveg.com. Again, this is Eric Lindstrom with Cheryl Leahy. And be well. Shoot.
Thank you for tuning in to Animal Outlook's Vegan Family Podcast. Have episode ideas or questions about going vegan? Email us at govegan@tryveg.com. Since 1995, Animal Outlook has served as an unwavering force, bringing about positive changes for animals. Please consider a tax-deductible donation today. Visit animaloutlook.org for more.